All right, good evening. Today is Thursday. It is December 19th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. I'm joined by Chief, and we are also joined by an in-studio guest. We are joined by Rob Quinn. He is a biochemistry/microbiology professor at Michigan State University. Rob, listener of the show, too. You reached out. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Let's move that. We can tilt that mic just a little bit towards it.
There you go.
Yeah, there we
We're
go.
a rookie here. So.
Yeah. Now you sound great.
You'll
You sound
slide in
perfect.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
So how's it going, man? You just got the Big Ten year and everything, right? Or
Yeah, we're here to talk about Michigan State basketball.
exactly.
Upcoming Big Ten season.
All right. Well, I start paying attention to basketball around end of February. So I'll any tips you got, I'll pay attention to.
Okay. Ever since I got to Michigan State, I've been pretty diehard into the basketball team.
Yeah.
Okay. How long you been there?
Since 2018.
Okay.
6 years, I guess. Yeah.
All right. And then what's like the schooling here? Like, what's the process to get into what you do?
As a professor?
Yeah.
That's a long process. I mean, I have 3 degrees. So I did my undergraduate. I'm actually from Canada originally, Ontario, Canada, a little small town. Grew up playing hockey. We were talking to Chief. Did a master's degree at the University of Guelph, which is in Ontario. Hard to say, but some people have heard of it.
Guelph Storm. I've heard of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
The legendary Guelph Storm. That's their
OHL
Ontario
team.
Hockey League.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
OHL. Yep.
And then moved to Louisiana to do a PhD at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, Raging Cajuns. So I'm a Raging Cajun alumni.
This guy was nervous. He's got a big time voice.
Do I really?
Yeah. Great voice.
For sure.
And then, so you're not done. So I did my PhD in Louisiana, and then to do a science track. So I mostly do research. I'm a professor. I do some teaching, mostly research. A big part of that is what happens after your PhD, which is called a postdoc. So I did almost 2 postdocs in San Diego. The first at San Diego State, and then University of California, San Diego.
And was the gut biome, did you know it early on that's the laser focus you wanted to
It's funny
put?
you ask. I'm getting up in years now. So I was studying microbiomes, which is sort of the general term, before that word even really existed. But it started with lobsters and salmon fish, which sounds weird. But I've been studying the gut microbiome pretty directly for about 10 years.
Okay.
So I'm lost already.
Yeah, it's a complicated story.
So how transferable is the microbiome of a lobster or a salmon to a human being?
It's a good question. The techniques are similar, if not the same most of the time. I mean, you're studying a salmon as opposed to a mouse or a human, but we do DNA sequencing, so deep sequencing of DNA from bacteria. We also have a method called metabolomics, which uses mass spectrometry, which is pretty agnostic to the organism of study. And you ask similar questions. So it's usually about health and disease. So my PhD was studying lobsters that had this disease called shell disease, which surely no one's ever heard of. We use similar techniques between that you would with someone with, say, inflammatory bowel disease, which some people probably have heard of.
Mm-hmm. So then I always, there's this old quote, you'll probably know who said it, but it's from either the Romans or the Greeks, where it's all disease actually begins in the gut.
Yeah.
Have you heard that quote before?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. So how much of that do you think is actually true? Can you really rectify many of your ailments by taking care of your gut first?
I mean, I figured that's what we would end up talking about, and that's exactly true. Even as far back as hundreds of years ago, if not a couple thousands of years ago, some of the initial ideas of disease were an imbalance of human bodily fluids, right? The 4 humors, I think they were called. Hippocrates, I believe, first came up with this idea. 2 of those humors were called yellow and black bile. And my lab actually specifically studies the gut microbiome interactions with bile acids. So the idea was literally in the Middle Ages, if not even 1,000 years ago, that if you had them imbalance in these liquids in your body, you were sick. And that's kind of true. Okay. And it still remains kind of true.
And then are there how much can you do as a pre-diagnostic based upon a sample of someone
It's a good question. We can generate more data than you can even get your head around on some of these samples, but a diagnostic is really hard.
Okay.
So people, if you want a disease associated with the gut microbiome, which is mostly what we're talking about today, you could identify people's gut microbiomes that are very different from each other. We're really, really good at that. And you can generate this data. But whether or not that is a diagnosis of a disease is a totally different thing. There's many diseases that are associated with altered gut microbiomes, but we still struggle to kind of know what a healthy microbiome is. So how different are you from what you should be? And not everyone necessarily should be the same, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a tangible way without like extensive testing to tell how you are gut biome wise, like if it's healthy or not?
Yeah, great question. I'm not actually sure if it's still going on, but there was this huge effort that I was just sort of tangentially involved in California called the American Gut Project. Sorry. Yeah, I think I got it right. American Gut Project, which was like a citizen science effort. They say it was the biggest citizen science effort ever, at least in biology. I think maybe it still is, but not sure. So people would like collect their own fecal samples, so your own poop, and ship it to the lab in California. They would sequence it for you. I think they had like 10,000 samples from 10,000 people when I was still there in California. This is like 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they had a map. So you could like map out the degree of a microbiome. And then most people lie in this area of the map. So that's healthy, so to speak. And then you could see like, oh shit, like I'm way over here. What's up with that? Perhaps I'm unhealthy. But even after all that work, it's still a bit hard to define the healthy.
Okay. Is there like a dump thing, like with your feces, where you could kind of tell like what's going on down there?
What should your poop?
Yeah.
What's a healthy poop?
You know what? I mean, first of all, I'm not a gastroenterologist, so I don't know. But I think brown is probably where I'd start. But
okay, color.
Yeah, not really
more
sure.
color than consistency.
That's about as far as I could go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, do you are there supplements that you would take, like these prebiotics and probiotics rather, or both?
There's, decades now, maybe thousands of research studies on probiotics, and a lot of the evidence is starting to come to light. It's been a kind of frustrating science in some ways because it makes so much sense, right? Mm-hmm. There's bacteria in your gut, they're good for you. We should get the good ones, not the bad ones. Some of the bacteria in your gut could kill you. You don't want those. So the idea of like giving you good bacteria makes a lot of sense, but it's been really years, if not decades, to figure this out. And some of the research is coming to light where probiotics really do no harm.
Okay.
That's maybe the first approach. You want to answer that, right? Are these going to mess me up? Almost certainly no. But whether or not they improve things for your overall health is questionable. But there's some evidence in different areas, like diarrheal diseases, particularly for kids. Mm-hmm. Like diarrhea in a kid can be pretty serious, right? There's evidence that if they take probiotics, and even the mother takes probiotics during pregnancy, can help some of these aspects. And then antibiotics. So if you ever take antibiotics, there's pretty good evidence now that if you follow that up, chase it with a probiotic, it'll help you restore back to normal. But that's a whole other area of research that's really fascinating. Like what happens in your gut microbiome when you take antibiotics. But sort of get to the point, like there's a lot of areas that probiotics make a lot of sense and they may help, but the science just isn't really clear.
Okay. And then when you talk about this bacteria that everybody needs in their gut to be healthy, what is it actually doing in there?
Wow, good question. I mean, lots of stuff. One thing that the microbes do, that the field is really kind of cutting edge now, is that it seems like these gut bacteria that we think are good for us produce small molecules, little byproducts of their metabolism that are super healthy. Something called short-chain fatty acids that people may have heard of, or butyrate, which is actually in cranberry juice.
Okay.
A lot of it. These gut bacteria produce those compounds when we feed them the right stuff. And there's pretty good evidence in mice and in human trials that when you get a lot of those products from the gut microbiome, they help your gut health in many ways. So it seems to be the most evidence is that these microbes are producing compounds that are good for us.
And is it breaking down your food? Because I had heard that like you have your digestive tract, but it's actually the way you get nutrition is actually it's after what the gut microbiome does to what the food that you put in.
That's
is that true?
That's true in part.
Okay.
I mean, we have tons of digestive enzymes, pancreatic lipases and things that break down food. But that's true. So, your GI tract is like feet long, like something like 14 feet long or something like that. But 80% of the journey, there's not a lot of bacteria there. But in the last part, the colon, there's literally trillions of bacteria. So the food that makes it to your colon is primarily designed to be digested by the gut microbiome.
Okay.
So yeah, that's true, but it's not like it's exclusively gut bacteria.
All right.
Hey, let's pause for a second to talk about Cars.com. If you want to find a trustworthy dealer, a dealership with a bunch of reviews from shoppers like you, look no further than Cars.com. Cars.com offers the latest research, shopping tools, and dealership reviews to help every shopper find the perfect car. You can shop by monthly payment or filter by features to find the cars that fit your budget and needs. That's a beautiful thing, guys. Hop on that Cars.com. Specify exactly what you want. Dial it up, and then Cars.com is going to spit it back out at you exactly what you're looking for. So go check out Cars.com. It's really a beautiful and very useful tool to help you find your next car. Use that your garage feature and figure out what your car's worth now and hop in a new vehicle with Cars.com. So visit Cars.com and start exploring your next possibility today. It's that easy. Cars.com, type in everything you're looking for, and they'll get you set up just right. One more time, Cars.com. Go check them out. We were talking, this is a question from them downstairs, something about the smell of, have you heard about this lady who could smell people and know if they have Parkinson's?
I've heard that with dogs.
I've heard it with like dogs.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It is
That's what they were saying down there. I don't know how that question related to you specifically, but they're like, ask him about that. The yak people were asking me.
Yeah.
They asked you about that.
No idea.
There's nothing in the gut biome that would suggest that.
Never heard of that.
Okay, if that brings that.
I've heard of another term that's called leaky gut. It comes from, I think it's from like gluten. It could be a gluten in
that's a thing.
Okay.
That's a
so
thing.
Is that related to your microbiome?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's really where the science has gone, and a lot of evidence for what these good bacteria are doing are producing these small molecules that I mentioned, some of which like tighten your gut. So your gut's like a barrier, right? Each cell is up next to the next one, and they're open to your lumen, which is a word for your butt, basically in part of your gut. And sometimes if the cells aren't healthy, they start to get loose in those barriers.
Okay.
That's leaky gut. That's definitely a thing.
Okay.
And people that have unhealthy, really, guts in general tend to have a leaky gut. And you get a lot of bad stuff that gets into your blood, and including some microbial products, including bacterial cells, if you have a really bad leaky gut. So it looks like probiotics, healthy diet helps tighten that up, right?
Okay.
And then you get less leaky gut, I guess.
How do you know if you have leaky gut? Like, is there a...
Well, I don't think there's any clinical diagnostic
No, there's
of
nothing like that.
But in studies of mice and humans, it's been described and shown to exist. And there's genes and proteins that are like responsible for holding that barrier really tight. And people that are sick, like those proteins kind of suck and they're not doing their thing. People that are healthy, those proteins are robust. And I don't think there's like a diagnostic, oh, you got leaky gut.
Oh, so the people don't even know.
This kind of speaks to, the nature of science, right? Like what I'm talking about now, and people who do almost all fields of science, really comes to light maybe 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So
you're doing the method. You're always just looking for the next thing.
So is that like a big push right now? Is gut, like people are really...
Totally. I mean, it's not even new, right? Like I think I was in a convenience store in Michigan the other day, and there's like probiotics in the shelves right next to the like
Skittles.
the Bud Light or Miller Lite, excuse me.
Miller Lite.
Yeah. Everywhere. So it's clearly like household stuff now.
And they don't know. So you said these things can get into your blood, but they don't know like how that would manifest in an illness once it does cross that leaky gut, or is this like something that is autoimmune or something?
There's some things that are known. You'd be surprised. A lot of the evidence is like mental health.
Really?
So, yeah. Some of these products can really mess with your brain. It's not really my area, so I couldn't speak to it too specifically, but there's a lot of understanding that some products that the microbes make, the bad ones, get across the blood-brain barrier and can kind of mess you up.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, the blood-brain barrier is a thing that I've heard of and I've had explained to me, and I still just don't really understand how it even works. Like, how does that thing know to like keep certain molecules and proteins or whatever out of your brain and let other things through?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it, but it's this like hardcore barrier. Like the leaky gut thing I was talking about is nothing. I mean, that's like
compared to that
fortress.
Okay.
Like a fortress compared to that. Yeah.
I kind of feel like we should just even rewind it even further, because when we're talking like, all right, here, a gut biome professor, I was like, all right, like that's everything in my stomach, right? That's not the case, is what you're saying?
It's almost like the opposite of that.
Okay, that's why I'm like, all right, like this guy knows everything about the intestines and shit.
Not really, but
That's not the
stomach
case.
is like not where this happens.
Okay, so
So where is your gut?
yes, where is your
Like everywhere, right? Like I said, it's like 14 feet long.
Okay, so that's your whole
It's
GI.
squirming around.
Okay.
Yep, your GI tract, gastrointestinal tract.
Yeah.
And we have the business end, obviously, which is the destination,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. But most of where the microbes are is at the end of that journey. The
Okay.
last few feet, the colon.
The colon. So I remember, I think it was on, what was that HBO show? It was like a new show on HBO, but they did a whole series. Oh, Vice. When Vice used to be on HBO, if you remember that show. And they did a whole half an hour about like poop transplants.
Yep.
So where did that science come from? Is that something that's still being practiced, and is it effective?
Certainly. Yeah, it really is. There's certain cases where that's one of the only treatment options in Clostridioides difficile infection, so C. diff, which sucks. C. diff might be one of the worst things.
What does that do to you?
You basically shit to death.
Okay, sounds pretty bad.
Not good.
Bad way to go.
Really, really terrible infection. Antibiotic resistant, so like they give you antibiotics and it makes it worse at times. And it's really horrible. It's probably one of the worst ways to die, to be honest. Fecal transplants fix it.
What's a fecal transplant?
Exactly what it
What do you
sounds like.
think?
They take someone else's poop and shoot it up.
Yeah, talk about going to the business end. You put things in reverse. Take someone
Really?
else's poop, fire it up that end. Now, there's different ways it's done now. There's pills that people are taking. I'm actually not sure if those are clinically approved yet, but yeah, fecal transplant is exactly what it sounds like.
And then how does, once you do that transplant, like how does that actually work? Like how does your body absorb what it needs
That's
from
a
that?
great question. I don't think all of this is understood, but it's a repopulation. And the one thing I did kind of want to talk about is like, think of the gut microbiome as like an ecosystem, right? I mean, taking the train here, I went through forests and stuff and see some squirrels running around and deer running around and whatever else animals live in the forest. Like your gut microbiome is an ecology and ecosystem in its own right, and all these microbes that live in there. So when you get something like C. diff, which takes over, it's like an invasion of this terrible bacterium, but you need to bring the good guys back. So the fecal transplant is like firing all what the normal bacteria that should be there to kind of overwhelm the C. diff. But there's also evidence that it's not just that there's like products, those molecules I talked about that come with it from the fecal transplant that kind of set the environment up. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that for a long time, actually.
Let's.
Yeah, it's like if you took, I don't know, if you took a deer from an Illinois forest and put it in the savannah, like it's probably got stuff to eat, but it's not going to survive.
Okay.
Because it's not used to be and hasn't evolved to be there. So not only can you just add the microbes, similar for probiotics, like you can't just take a probiotic, it grows and is happy and lives there. It needs its ecosystem, its environment to thrive. And they think the fecal transplant is kind of similar, where it's not just the bugs, but it's also the products that they produce that come with them that sets that environment that they can live and thrive and fix you.
And is that like, oh, like, hey, worst case scenario, we have to do this? Or are there people who do it as like a precautionary elective thing to do this fecal transplant?
I don't really know.
Okay.
Again, I'm not clinical. My PhD was in lobsters, so I don't really know.
Okay. All right. Because that would be interesting.
It would.
Like you went to Turkey for a hair transplant. I wonder if you could just go get new poop and new microbiome somewhere in Turkey.
I'd be very careful with that.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Good to know.
What about like the addition of things into that ecosystem, right? Like what has there been like research in that?
Yeah,
That's
I can
not-
think of some specific examples related to Michigan State even. Prunes. So I work with a lab at Michigan State that studies prunes. Well, they really study bone health and the effects it has on your bones through prunes. So it seems like, and if I was to give advice, right, if we were going to walk away today, it's like, what should we do to improve our gut microbiome? I would just say fiber. Eat fiber and then eat more fiber and
Okay.
any different kinds of fiber you can get. It seems like that's the fuel for the good bugs, right? So prunes are an interesting example because they're packed full of really complex fibers and sugars that a lot of other foods don't have. And if you feed a mouse prunes for like 3 days, it shifts their gut microbiome like unrecognizably. It's a
Really?
huge effect. And this is not, it's starting to filter into the clinical and even like on the internet. You can Google prunes and bone health, particularly for women. It seems that if people have osteoporosis, eating prunes like has a pretty good evidence behind a benefit for strengthening bones, which is a crazy thing to say, but it has to do with these molecules. The small molecules, the microbes make the good molecules. We don't actually know what they are, that they somehow like talk to your bone cells to make better bone. It's pretty amazing.
So when prunes become the big thing next year or in the coming year, this is,
Well, I'm ahead of the curve. I've been eating prunes ever since I worked with this lab. I'm like, yep.
How many prunes? Like, is there like a handful a day?
That's pretty well known. So I think, again, you have to look at the clinical trial, but I think like 3 to 4 is enough every day. But if you stop, it like goes right back.
Huh.
You got to keep it up.
Keep feeding it.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of back to what you're saying. Like, we've known a lot of these things for a long time. I remember being a little kid, and my grandparents on my dad's side just always had prunes and prune juice in the fridge. And I was like, this is gross. And then they like tell you that it was good for your gut. But this had to be back in like 1994.
Yeah, how do they got the stigma of being gross? I don't get. Because
they're tasty?
They don't really taste bad. They're like kind of sweet. They're like big, sort of slimy raisins.
There you go.
Yeah.
Slimy raisin doesn't sound
But I've been eating them. Even though there isn't evidence for a lot of benefit in men, I've been eating them.
Okay.
I believe we just haven't figured it out yet.
Is there any other food that's in that category where it's like...
Oh, lots. Yeah. I mean, things that are packed with fiber. I'm trying to think. Avocados are full of fiber.
Okay.
I just always knew it as a laxative. To be honest with you.
Which is sort of speaking to what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I think in my 6th grade year, there was a bunch of kids in 8th grade football, and they were trying to make weight, and they were on the prune juice diet.
Really?
They were just slamming it.
Not sure that's been studied in clinical trials.
Hey, let's pause another time because I want to talk about Factor. Do you notice how the days are shorter, but your to-do lists aren't? Power through your busy days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. From breakfast to dinner and anything in between, Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or you enjoy mixing things up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options you can add to your box, like keto cookies, pressed juices, and smoothies. Don't let shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Factor lets you do you. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Because Factor's meals are chef prepared and dietitian approved, you're going to not only love how the Factor meals taste, but also how they support your goals. Head to factormeals.com/50dogwalk and use code 50dogwalk. That's 50dogwalk to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code 50dogwalk at factormeals.com/50dogwalk to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping while your subscription is active. Go check them out.
But is there things where it's like, hey, like this is a sort of like almost a myth from older times, and then do you go back and like, let's see if there's any truth to that myth?
That's a big part of the field, and I think why it's so exciting and why it makes sense to people, and perhaps why I'm here. Like, you guys have heard about this, and a lot of like scientific research that makes no sense to anyone. But it makes sense, right, that we've been eating very different foods in the last 120 or so years in the Industrial Revolution than we did before, right? We used to hunt and gather. We rarely ate meat. We'd pick up plants we could eat and taste them. They taste like shit. We don't eat them. Next one, okay, this one's good. It makes a lot of sense that the diets that we likely should be eating are the ones that we have in the past. And the past is preceding us a lot more time than the more recent future, right? 100 years, our diet's been very different than the previous 5 million.
Yeah, even like the last 50 years. I feel like that's been ramped up.
True. I think people are getting smart to that, and it's sort of the whole microbiome thing. Like, it's not necessarily surprising that we should be eating good, healthy food. A lot of different types of plants appears to be some of the best advice you can get.
And you said you eat prunes, but do you kind of try to live this way in general? Like, I'm going to...
Oh, I mean, since I moved to Michigan, I've become quite fond of wings, boneless wings, buffalo wings in particular. So no.
Okay.
I mean... on a Friday night, later this evening, like I try, right? But it is what it is. I mean,
okay.
Not fork and knife and prunes tonight for Friday night dinner.
I will chase. Okay, actually, this is another funny one. So there's another lab that we work at Michigan State that studies plant products, particularly in celery.
Okay.
So I go eat my buffalo chicken wings perhaps later this evening. I will order double celery because there's a study that they did where they give mice a high-fat diet with and without this product from celery, this molecule from celery. The mice that get the molecule with the high fat lose weight.
Huh.
So they always look at me like I'm a weirdo when I order like extra veggies, and if they don't bring it, I like insist. No, can I please have more celery?
Give me a veggie chaser.
What's
wrong with this guy?
I didn't know that that fact, obviously, but I always just like the vegetables too. I always get the carrots and the celery.
Yeah.
And this crew makes fun of me. I didn't do it for health. I just enjoy it.
I was at a place recently, didn't offer it.
Oh.
I almost walked out.
Yeah, I don't blame it.
It is kind of crazy that it's even offered, though. Right?
It's a good palate cleanser. I think that's the move.
But it's like you're literally eating, like wings are like one of the worst things you can have.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's Midwestern cuisine at its finest.
Yeah. It is. Is there, so what's like prunes is like a surprise, well, not surprising, but it's got the green light. Has there been any studies where it's like this has been proven to be not great for
It's an interesting question. There's a paper that came out in Science a few weeks ago that I don't know the detail of what this food is, but they've developed a microbiome-centered food to help malnourished kids. I think it's in Bangladesh in particular. So, I mean, really, if you're looking for sort of suggestions, it's fiber. Any food, make choices for fiber. Don't eat white bread. Choose the brown bread. I think it tastes better to begin with. But there are people and companies that are developing like microbiome targeted foods to optimize all this stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah, that figures that's coming.
Yeah, and has there been studies on your life expectancy if you have a strong microbiome versus a depleted one?
I don't think so. That's a good question. It's like one of the challenges with, again, I'm not a nutritionist at all.
Yeah.
One of the challenges of nutrition research is like takes a long time.
Well, and it's like, how do you keep your sample, everybody doing the same thing, right? Because it's like you go home and it's like, how can you?
Oh, that's a huge part of it.
Right. So if you have a mouse, like you can control what the mouse has. You can't really do like.
There's been a lot of challenges with translating studies in mice to people, and you're right. That's a big part of it. Is like these self-reported food things. It's like, you eat chicken wings by yourself in the closet, you don't tell anyone, and then you write down that I had a salad for dinner. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a real thing, and it's a challenge in this field, and nutrition in particular, where like it's hard to study people because it's difficult to report. It's even hard, even if you told the truth. What did I eat yesterday exactly?
Yeah, you'd have to like journal it.
Yeah. It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Chia seeds?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I have heard about those. Yeah, a lot of like complex sugars in those. Yeah.
Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah.
And then, so why did you start with lobster, I guess would be my first question. And I feel like I've heard that like people who study like the nervous system also start with lobster. So what is it about the lobster that...
I don't think it... it's a bit of a long story, but I think when
I was I
was a kid in Canada, I did a lot of fishing.
Okay.
Grew up fishing. And I actually first got into studying salmon, bacterial diseases of salmon. And the lobster was kind of a natural progression from that. And I met a professor in Louisiana.
More
Shout
lobster
out
down
Andre.
there.
I'm sure you're a listener.
Yeah. Send him the link.
Yeah, I will. And yeah, I don't think there's a lot of real logic behind it. It was just things I thought were interesting. Just kind of chase it.
And then was that like a problem in the salmon industry?
Well, in the lobster thing is a kind of interesting story. This is like late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, I got into it later, but this disease called shell disease in the southern New England, particularly Rhode Island, like I think it's Narragansett Bay. I don't really remember now, but they were pulling up these lobsters. It looked like somebody took a cigarette and like burnt their shell. These bacteria that were eating into the lobster shells, and it was a real problem. So like 50% of the lobsters late in the summer they'd pull up they couldn't sell them. Didn't affect the meat.
Yeah,
couldn't sell the lobsters. And I kind of got out of it. I moved to San Diego and did something entirely different. But I kind of looked up later. It seems like what had happened is the fishery just kind of collapsed. But it didn't matter much because north of Cape Cod, the water temperatures are way colder, and like 98% of the lobster catch is north of Cape Cod, and the disease wasn't there. So nobody really cared.
No one move it along.
I think it sucked if you were from Rhode Island.
Yeah, if you're a lobsterman in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
Yeah.
What, Chief? You always forget the fact you always bring up that you're obsessed with. Regardless, like what's a fact about the gut biome that you're like you always?
Okay, I got one. So the human genome is made of like 20,000 genes.
Mm-hmm.
The estimates of the diversity of the genes in the microbiome is on the order of like 600,000. So there's 30 times more genetic potential in your gut microbiome than there is in your own genes, in your own cells.
And do they replicate and they grow and change in your gut? Like, is your gut microbiome, assuming you didn't have the fecal transplant, is that totally unique to you?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the resolution, right? Like if you get down to the weeds, deep in the weeds, yeah, everyone's different. Completely.
Okay.
There are people that are similar. There's higher levels, so it's taxonomy, right? Like there's different evolutionary lineages that have been defined. So some bacteria have we're Homo sapiens, we're all mammals. I think it's kind of similar with bacteria.
Okay.
But at that fine grain, like species or strain level, we are all different. And some people are wildly different. And that makes it hard to study because you're not treating the same thing.
The other fact that I do know, I don't know if we've talked about this, where it's like you have more bacterial cells than human cells in your body. Is that true?
That's a funny story. It seems like maybe not really.
Okay.
There was some papers like years ago, maybe 10 more years ago, that said, yeah, there's like 10 times more bacterial cells in your body than there is your own cells. And people crunch the math, and turns out it's maybe more like 1 to 1.
Okay.
But
still though.
Probably depends on whether or not you took a shit yet, because a lot of the bacteria in your gut are coming out in your poop.
Okay. That is kind of crazy though, that you're like almost within the margin of error, equal parts bacteria and human cells.
But I think crazier is the level of the genes.
Yeah.
There's so much genetic potential in the microbiome. We don't even know what like maybe 60 to 70% of it even does.
But it has all been identified, or you find new. Okay. All right.
We could take your poop, sequence it, find a gene. We have no idea what it does. And probably.
But you've seen it somewhere else before, right?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Most of the time, yeah. Like, there'll be genes that we can't even recognize.
Okay.
Constantly, yeah, in the gut microbiome.
And do you get that? You made a little reference to this earlier, but how much of that of your gut microbiome just comes from your mother in utero? And like, how long do you have any particular type of bacteria in your body? Do you have like some that's in your body for your whole life in theory?
Great question. That's really one of the more fascinating, I think, aspects of this. I've never studied this myself, but I've followed the literature. It's like amazing studying the first inoculation. So the womb is sterile. There was some debate about that for a long time, but the womb is sterile, and your first encounter with the world and the world of microbes is through the birth canal.
Oh.
And
Okay.
And there's this like inoculation event where you come through the woman's birth canal and it goes everywhere and it gets into your gut. And there's this really interesting transition for all of us through the first few years of life. So your gut microbiome changes drastically within the first 2 to 3 years. And then you're just kind of the same until you're 70. Then it starts changing.
Really?
So my gut microbiome probably looked like it does now when I was 4.
Is there something that triggers that change at age 3 or 4 or whatever it is?
I think so. I think it's probably complicated. I don't really know, but like different physiological changes.
Okay.
Actually, sorry, I should answer that better. Yes, we do know that.
Okay.
I was thinking more from the mother's side, but it's food. So mostly you're eating breast milk, right? Oh, and that's how it's supposed to be done, right? With the evolution of humans. And the bacteria that are in your gut are fueled off of the sugars and the fats in breast milk. So there's intense research, and there has been for a couple decades now, on like formula-fed babies compared to breastfed babies. How does it affect the gut microbiome? The answer is it does. And the other really interesting, and I think hopefully fixable aspect of this is C-sections. So many women, unfortunately, have to have a C-section. Sometimes there's no choice. And the microbiome of the baby, whether it's been C-section or natural birth, is starkly different.
Huh. Really?
Yeah. And the babies that are C-section, they have bacteria from the mother's skin.
Okay.
Wow.
And there's long been known this association with C-sections and asthma and like certain allergies and things like that.
Wow.
They think that's why.
So then how much, is your immune system kind of born out of your gut microbiome?
They talk to each other.
Okay.
I think that's one of the poorly understood aspects of all this. People are studying it intensely, but it's so complicated. Like there's the cells and that barrier, right? They got little feelers, little detectors, if you will.
Okay.
And they can say, this is a good bug. Oh shit, this is a bad bug. How they do that is wildly complicated and I don't think very well understood. But as you evolve and as you it's not evolve, but as you grow from an infant, your microbes are talking to your cells and saying like, let's get along here. We're cool. We're gonna be fine. And a lot of diseases of the gut that gets messed up. Like inflammatory bowel disease, for example, is almost certainly involved with sort of an alarm response from your cells to your gut microbiome saying these things are a problem, we need to stop them, even though they're not a problem. They're just your gut microbiome, but your signals are all crossed up.
Okay. And we do have our guy, Danny Conrad, if you're familiar with him from this show.
Yeah.
He has IBS. We've talked about that forever. Is
that IBD or IBS?
I believe it's IBS, right?
He says IBS, but he probably doesn't.
He probably doesn't know either.
Well, one of them is a lot more serious than the other.
I think he has IBS, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Whatever one allows him to come to work every day.
Yeah, there's some evidence that probiotics can help with that.
Okay, so we just got to start slipping probiotics into his body.
Or perhaps prebiotics, which is the word I hadn't used yet. That's the prunes.
Okay, so that was gonna be my next question. What is the difference between pre and pro?
Yeah, it's just not live microbes.
Okay.
So probiotics are live, like defined as live bacteria that you put into your body. It doesn't necessarily have bacteria. Some are yeast.
That's fascinating, the pregnancy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah. There's a lot of and then antibiotics. So when you're a little baby, you take antibiotics and your microbiome just totally shifts. And whether or not it goes back to that healthy track is important. We don't really know the outcomes of that, but if it doesn't, you can have some problems.
So then you're a professor at Michigan State.
Yeah.
What is like the name of one of your classes? Like what do you
I teach
teaching?
Biochemistry for the most part. Yeah, I teach DNA, structure and function.
Okay. So and then are you just like having these students and you yourself just like looking under microscopes all day long? What's your day-to-day like in that field?
Yeah. I mean, to some degree.
Okay.
We look at microscopes all day long.
All right.
A lot of big data science. So we like generate these big data sets on samples like this and then figure out what's in them using computers and things like that.
Okay.
What about the neurological links?
There's a lot. I don't want to get into it too much because there's a lot of like kind of controversial aspects of this, but like autism and Parkinson's disease, a lot of like people with not necessarily mental health, but like mental diseases, if you would. There's an associated dysbiosis. The microbiome is different in those people. Whether it's cause or consequence is really hard to figure out, but there's pretty good evidence that you can like improve it to some degree if you can.
So it's like causation, correlation.
Yeah, it's like if you have said disease, perhaps autism, do you have autism because your gut microbiome drove that? Or do you have a different gut microbiome because you have autism and you behave differently?
Okay.
Chicken under the egg.
It really is a tough part of this.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people bicker about that.
Yeah, like for example, there was a lot of the early work in microbiomes about diabetes. So people that have diabetes have a different gut microbiome. One of the biggest impacts of your gut on your microbiome is alcohol. People that have diabetes tend to not drink a lot of alcohol.
Tend not to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty hard on them.
Okay.
So there was some papers a couple of years ago that was like, oh, well, it looks like this is a signal of alcohol, not so much diabetes.
Okay, so then if you were to cut that out, your gut would respond.
Yeah.
In theory.
But, who wants to do that?
Who wants to do that? Yeah, it's all with those little trade-offs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Miller Lite signs everywhere.
Health versus fun. Yeah. Okay.
Damn.
Yeah, that's the dilemma, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of it.
But there's some easy things like eating prunes, eating fiber is pretty easy to do.
Eating celery.
Eat celery.
How much fiber are we talking? And are we talking like natural fiber? Or is there a supplement that you like?
I don't really know, but I think all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just do whatever works for you.
So
right?
When we talk about probiotics, you get them in a pill bottle, right? You take them orally.
Yeah, but they're in yogurts. Some of them are in drinks, and then fermented foods is something we could talk about.
So then, but specifically with those, like, how do they keep, this is such a dumb question. If you're taking it in a pill, how is that bacteria able to stay alive in a pill bottle to the point?
So great question. It's a bit complicated microbiology stuff, but some bacteria can make spores.
Okay.
Which is like a kind of a dormant state where they're even, some of them are even resistant to like radiation.
Whoa.
So they can be in spores. They also are really quite resilient. So I think most of the preparations of probiotics are what is called lyophilized, which basically just means dried.
Okay.
You could dry the cells down and they'll like come back.
Yeah. So, and what is the best delivery method for that then? You're talking these yogurts and other food and fermented foods.
It's a good question. So I consult with a company, so I'm not sure how much I can say. But there's a lot of kind of technology that's being developed for this to help with that. And one of the approaches is something called synbiotics. We're getting deep into it now. So you take a prebiotic and a probiotic. So I kind of described how like the microbes need the right food. The good microbes need the right food.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have the right food, those microbes aren't going to thrive. So you got to do both. There's even some companies, and can't give up too much detail, but that will engineer a bug to eat a particular sugar. And then you take the probiotic with that sugar that all the other bugs can't eat. That really helps that establishment of a good bug.
Okay. And then is this something that you should, like if you take it, I know some people take them every day. Is that recommended for
Yeah,
probiotic?
it seems like that's definitely a part of it. A lot of the clinical studies and like the reviews and all this stuff is like, you got to keep it up.
Okay.
You have to keep going. And again, the trial, it's one of the challenges, right? Like it's hard to do a clinical trial that takes 10 years to see an effect. But it looks like most of the evidence for probiotics helping are after longer periods of time, months.
Okay.
That was most of the questions I had dialed up. But is there
so-
anything we didn't get into today?
Michigan State basketball.
Yeah. Are they back?
Oh, they're back.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right.
Deep squad.
Deep. Are they top 25?
I think they're 21st. Yeah. As of
Okay.
this Monday.
I wrote them off after last year. We put that bet on them. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
It was just,
Iowa.
yes.
Iowa got them.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
January, February, Izzo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the thing. That is the thing. Your wife's wearing the Sparty green right now.
Yeah. Well, I won't bring up the fact that we're a house divided right now. She works at the University of Michigan.
Oh. Let's go.
How far is Lansing from?
Hour, 10 minutes.
Okay.
It's she's grinding on the highway.
Yeah, she's winning.
every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Certainly on the football field. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else we didn't get to that particular interesting? Or
No, I mean, whatever you guys are interested in talking about.
Yeah. Okay. You got anything else, Chief?
I think so, but I think I have more questions about the stuff you can't talk about on camera.
Sure, yeah.
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 Maybe later.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot more complex than I realized. Because like you said, you're like, I'm not a nutritionist, but
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the questions
Maybe one like
It's like they're linked.
everybody
kind of,
has.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe one message for people out there, and like this is sort of a general science thing, is like I don't think people really understand what it's like to be able to recognize something you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just don't know. And that's an uncomfortable thing for people sometimes. Where like, what does the fiber do? Why can't I use this or that? Not. We just haven't studied it. It's just not known. Like I told you, those 600,000 genes, we only know what like 30% of them even do.
How long does it take to? Is there like a timeline to be like, oh, we're gonna map this all out? Because I remember when like the human genome was being mapped, and then it was like we're gonna do this by year whatever. And is there a similar kind of goal in your field?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, people are doing that. And in some ways, it's been kind of done already. One thing that is remarkable, the technology in our field is wild. Like the DNA sequencing capabilities, like billions and billions of DNA sequences can be read in a day. So we can characterize it. Like we can sequence all these bacteria very easily, but then putting it all together, making sense of it, and then providing some type of health advice.
Yeah.
It's a whole other thing entirely.
And part of the reason I'm interested in that is because if you take supplements, right? Like a lot of people take vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A, whatever, and some you get from your diet. Is there going to be a point where it's like, and maybe it already exists, where it's like, I'm not taking probiotics, I'm taking this strain of bacteria for a targeted response?
Yeah, that's coming.
It is coming?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the
But
things.
that's not out there now, right? It's kind
To some degree. I
Okay.
mean, one of the things the literature is showing us is that like probiotics is a pretty generic thing. Like
Right.
which one?
right. It would be
Which
like
one?
I'm taking a vitamin as opposed to vitamin A or C.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a disease that needed vitamin A and you're taking, vitamin whatever else, it's
Right.
not going to help you. But this
Yeah.
is more like each strain can be really quite different from each other, and we don't really know much about them.
Okay.
So it does seem like that's coming, right? It's going to be better formulations of particular bacteria that do a particular thing that helps you, as opposed to just like, oh, it's called lactobacillus, for example.
Yeah.
Take lactobacillus. Well, there's like dozens of species.
Of that.
And even within the species, there's thousands of strains. So which strain? But we're figuring
This
it
is so much information.
It's a lot.
It's like it's like I don't even know how to start asking questions
yeah,
because it's like
Maybe that kind of gives you the idea of like,
yeah.
But again, it's an interesting science in some ways because it makes a lot of sense to people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why, you guys were curious about it. And, I go to a convenience store and I can buy a probiotic yogurt
Yeah.
because it kind of makes sense to people. So it's not so far-fetched, like some science, include science that we do in my lab, that it's a little harder to go over on a podcast.
Because didn't you, like, I assumed it all with like the large intestine, the small intestine. I thought it was all kind of, and I know they're all linked in some ways, but not.
No, it's very different at different stages through the gut.
Okay, that's crazy. I had diverticulitis. What's the? That's not good.
Again, no medical advice.
But never mind. We have to get into it.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
It was what, like, right?
2018, right?
Yeah,
We got hired.
first started.
When we
Yeah.
first started.
Yeah.
And like, I think like an air pocket like opened up or something.
Damn.
Yeah, that's bad, right?
Sounds like maybe a fart coming or something. I really don't know much about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. We could wrap this up, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Anything you want to get out there,
No,
Professor Rob?
just love science. People out there interested in a career in science. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. That's all I would say.
And if we definitely have some Michigan State listeners.
Oh, yeah.
If they sign up for a class or something, how
Go
does it
green,
work?
go white.
Well, I think, I don't know how many of your listeners in biochemistry, but maybe they are out there. Go green.
You're a
go white.
listener.
That's what I'd say. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right then. Thanks a lot. Nothing else you want to get out there?
No,
Besides
that's
that?
good.
All
Whatever
right.
you guys want to talk about was fine.
Sweet. Thanks,
All right.
Rob. Appreciate
Hey,
it.
Thanks, guys.
Let's go play ball. All right.
Do it. Yeah.